She weighed just 93 pounds, barely breathing in the back of a rusted car. No food, no help, no reason to keep going. Then, in her final moments, something happened that no one saw coming. The car was cold. Not just cold, freezing. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones, that makes your fingers feel like they belong to someone else. Amber Hoffman curled up in the back seat, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around her frail body. 93 pounds. That's all that was left of her. Her eyes fluttered open for a second, just long enough to see her breath misting in the dim interior. Her stomach clenched, a familiar, aching hunger, the kind that gnawed at her insides but had long since stopped demanding food. She hadn't eaten in, 2 days? 3? A sharp sting pulsed from her arm. Infection. She knew it. The makeshift bandage, a torn piece of an old shirt, was soaked through. The wound beneath it throbbed, a deep, angry red, spreading its poison through her veins. It didn't matter. Nothing did. Outside, life continued. People hurried past, their silhouettes blurred by the frost on the window. None of them saw her. Or maybe they did, and chose not to. Amber swallowed, or tried to. Her throat burned. Her body ached, but the worst of it came from inside. The craving. It was always there, an insatiable beast clawing at her from within. Just one more hit. That's all she needed. But she had nothing left. No money. No favors to call in. No more chances. She closed her eyes. If she was lucky, she wouldn't wake up. And for the first time in a long, long time, she prayed she wouldn't. Amber Hoffman. A name that once meant something. A girl who once had a life. Dreams. A future. She grew up in a nice neighborhood. Not rich, not poor. Just normal. 2 parents. A younger sister. A house with a backyard and a dog named Baxter. It should have been enough. But something had always been off. Her parents fought a lot. Screaming matches that rattled the windows, shattered dishes, slammed doors. Her father drank. Her mother cried. And Amber? She learned early on that she was safest when she was invisible. By high school, she had mastered the art of pretending. Pretending she was fine. Pretending she didn't care when her dad left. Pretending she wasn't drowning under the weight of it all. Then she met him. Derek. Older. Dangerous. Exciting. He made her feel alive in a way she never had before. The first time he handed her a little white pill, she hesitated. But only for a second. 1 pill turned into 2. Then 3. Then something stronger. And suddenly, she wasn't pretending anymore. She was floating. Untouchable. Free. It happened so quickly. One day, she was skipping class, hanging out with the wrong crowd. The next, she was stealing from her mom's purse just to get her next fix. Then she dropped out. Then she stopped coming home. Then, one night, she didn't have a home to go back to. She remembered standing outside the locked front door, pounding, screaming, begging. Her mother's voice, shaking, muffled from the other side. "I can't do this anymore, Amber." The deadbolt clicked. That was the last time she ever saw her mother. At first, she crashed on couches, stayed with people who were just as lost as she was. But it never lasted. People get tired of junkies. Eventually, there was nowhere left to go. She ended up in a tent city under an overpass. That was where everything fell apart. She learned to sleep light, one eye open, hand gripping a rusted switchblade. She learned to keep moving or risk waking up to find everything she owned stolen. She learned that people don't care about the homeless. They don't look. They step over you. They ignore your outstretched hand. They whisper when they think you can't hear. Amber had once been one of them, a person with a life, a family. But now, she was nothing. It had been raining for days. She had found shelter in an abandoned gas station, curled up in the corner, shivering. The cold was unbearable, but the withdrawal was worse. Every inch of her body screamed for relief, for just one more hit. She had nothing left to sell. Then a man. He saw her, crouched down, a mocking smile on his lips. "You look like you need something." Amber should have run, but she was too weak. The deal was simple. 1 hit, for a price. Her body. She almost said yes. Almost. Instead, she ran, barefoot, cold, rain pounding against her skin. She didn't stop. Not until her legs gave out and she collapsed against the side of a dumpster, gasping, crying, hating herself. She could have died that night. She should have, but she didn't. That night, in the frozen dark, Amber felt it, the end creeping closer. She wasn't scared. Not anymore. Her body was failing. Infection, starvation, the weight of years of self-destruction. Then a light. A knock on the window. Weakly, she turned her head, and there, standing in the cold, was her mother, tears in her eyes, a phone in her shaking hands. And Amber? She was too tired to run, too tired to fight. Maybe for the first time in forever, it was time to stop. Amber Hoffman used to know hunger in an abstract way, the kind of hunger that came from skipping breakfast or running late for lunch. But now, hunger was something else entirely. It was a monster, gnawing at her insides, twisting her gut, making her weak. Days passed with nothing but sips of rainwater collected in an old cup. Food? A distant memory. She learned where the restaurants dumped their leftovers, which trash bins had the least rotting waste. The smell didn't bother her anymore. She was beyond that. One night, she found a half-eaten burger, cold, damp, but food. She tore into it like a starving animal. "Hey, that's mine!" A shove, a fist to her ribs. She hit the ground, hard hands scraping against the asphalt. A man, ragged, wild-eyed, just like her, grabbed the burger, stuffing it into his mouth. Amber didn't fight back. What was the point? She learned fast. The streets were not a place for the weak. There were rules. Unspoken, brutal rules. Never stay in one place too long. Never look people in the eye. Never trust anyone. But even then, bad things happened. One night, she was sleeping under an overpass, wrapped in a tattered blanket, when she woke to hands pulling at her coat. "Don't move." A knife pressed against her throat. Amber froze, barely breathing as fingers rifled through her pockets. Empty. She had nothing. Useless bitch. A kick to her ribs. She didn't even scream, just curled up, bracing for more. But they were already gone. She pulled herself up, coughing, wincing. Her side ached, probably bruised. Maybe cracked. But she was alive. Barely. Then came the fever. The infection had been festering for weeks. A small wound on her arm, something minor, had turned into something angry and vicious. Swollen. Hot to the touch. Her whole body ached. A deep, unbearable pain. She tried to walk, but the world tilted, her vision blurring. The cold pavement rushed up to meet her. And then, darkness. She woke up barely. Her body felt like lead. Her skin burned, drenched in sweat, but she was freezing. Sick. So sick. She tried to sit up. Failed. Her breath came in short, painful gasps. Her heart pounded, her chest tight. Was this it? Maybe. And wasn't that better? Amber had spent years running. From the pain, from the memories, from herself. Maybe it was time to stop. Her fingers, trembling, reached for something, anything to hold on to. But there was nothing. Her mind whispered, "You're alone. No one is coming for you. Just let go." She closed her eyes. And then, a knock on the window. Weakly, she turned her head. A shadowy figure stood outside, backlit by the street lamp. A face familiar. Amber's breath hitched. No, it couldn't be. The door opened, and suddenly, arms around her. A voice. A scent. Amber. Oh my God. Amber. Her mother. Her mother. Tears burned her eyes, but she had no strength left to cry. She let herself collapse into the warmth, the scent of home. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. The beeping of machines, the steady rhythm of a heart monitor, the scent of antiseptic, bleach, and something oddly familiar, soap. Real, clean soap. Amber stirred, her eyelids heavy, her throat dry. She was warm, wrapped in blankets, hooked 2 and 4. Alive. A shadow shifted beside her. Her mother. Puffy eyes. A tired, worried face. But there. She was there. Amber's voice was barely a whisper. "Where am I?" Her mother exhaled, a mix of relief and exhaustion. "You're in the hospital. You almost didn't make it." Her stomach twisted. She had been so close to disappearing forever. A doctor entered, scanning the machines, the charts, before looking at her with quiet intensity. "Miss Hoffman, let's be honest, you should be dead." Blunt. Matter of fact. Like a verdict. Amber stared. "Your body is shutting down. Malnourishment, infections, heart strain. If you don't change something now, you won't survive the next month." Silence. "I need you to understand, this isn't just about detoxing. Your heart is weak. Your organs are failing. You don't get a second chance after this. This is it." Amber wanted to scoff, wanted to tell him she didn't care. But then, her mother's hand found hers. She wasn't crying. Not anymore. Just looking at her. Desperate. Terrified. "Amber, please," she whispered. "Please fight." The words hit harder than any punch, any wound, any overdose she had ever faced. Because for the first time in years, someone wanted her to live. Amber swallowed. The road ahead was impossible. But maybe, just maybe, she wasn't done yet. Day 1. The fire started in her bones. It spread to her muscles, her skin, even her thoughts, a screaming, clawing, all-consuming agony. She couldn't stop shaking. She gripped the hospital sheets, soaked in sweat, her body convulsing against the mattress. It felt like something was ripping her apart from the inside. She wanted to scream. She wanted to die. Just one hit. Just one more. Then you'll stop for real. Her brain whispered the lie, so soft, so sweet. But there was no way to give in now. The doctors had taken everything. No escape. No way out. She clawed at her skin. Her nails dug into her arms, trying to rip the need out of her own flesh. Her mother sat by the bed, watching, helpless. Silent tears. Hands clasped. Praying. Amber turned away. She hated being seen like this. Hated feeling so exposed. Day 3. The hallucinations started. Shadows crawled up the walls. Figures whispered in the corners of the room, their voices mocking. At one point, she swore she saw Derek, his smirking face, standing at the foot of her bed. "You think you can walk away from this?" Amber gasped, heart hammering. She blinked, and he was gone. She pressed her hands to her head, trying to drown out the static, the voices, the unbearable itch beneath her skin. She couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe, couldn't make the craving stop. Just one. No! She curled up, pulling the blankets over herself, gritting her teeth, willing herself to endure. She had come too far to give in now. Day 5. The nausea hit like a wrecking ball. She couldn't keep food down. Everything hurt. Every inch of her body screamed for relief, but relief wasn't coming. The worst part? The emptiness. Without the drugs, without the high, there was nothing left. Just her, a broken girl in a hospital bed. And for the first time, she wondered if she had ever been anything else. It happened slowly, like the first crack of sunlight after a storm. The first full meal. The first time she ate without throwing up. It was just soup, warm and plain, but it tasted like the best thing in the world. Her mother cried. Amber didn't. Not yet. The first real shower. Hot water. Steam curling around her. The grime, the sweat, the years of dirt and regret washing down the drain. She touched her face, stared at herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the girl looking back. She looked human again. The first steps outside. The hospital had a small courtyard. Nothing special. A few benches, some trees. But when Amber stepped out for the first time, it felt like another world. The wind against her skin. The smell of fresh air, of grass. She closed her eyes and breathed. She hadn't done that in a long time. One day, a nurse handed her a small notebook and a pen. "Write something," she said. "It helps." Amber stared at the blank pages for a long time. Then, slowly, she wrote, "I am still here." And for the first time in years, she believed it. It had been months. Amber had gained weight. She was stronger now. She was ready, or so she thought. One night at the recovery center, she heard a familiar voice. Lisa, one of the girls she used to run with. Gaunt, hollow-eyed, barely standing. Lisa's hands shook as she sat across from Amber. Her pupils were blown wide. "I can't do this, Amber." Amber knew that look, knew that feeling. Lisa was slipping. Then, she reached into her pocket. A small bag. Amber's heart stopped. "Just one last time," Lisa whispered. "You and me. Just like before." Amber's hands trembled. Her mind screamed. the beast inside clawing at her chest. Just one. One hit. One taste of oblivion. She could. She could forget it all. She could drown again. Or she could choose life. Amber took a slow, shuddering breath. She reached across the table and took Lisa's hand instead. "Come with me," she whispered. "Let's get clean together." Lisa broke down. Amber didn't let go, because this time she was strong enough to hold on. Morning light filtered through the window, casting golden streaks across the floor. Amber stretched, feeling the warmth of a soft blanket against her skin. Her bed, her apartment, her life. She had a job now. Nothing glamorous, just a quiet gig at a coffee shop. But for the first time in years, she had structure, purpose, a reason to wake up every morning. And she wasn't alone. A soft meow echoed through the small apartment, and Amber smiled as a small gray cat jumped onto the bed, curling up against her chest. Milo. From the kitchen, another meow Luna. Two stray kittens she had found outside the recovery center, shivering in the rain. Just like she had been, she took them in, fed them, gave them warmth. She had saved them. The irony wasn't lost on her. Months ago, she had been the one needing saving. Now, she was the one doing the saving. She walked to work every day, passing the streets where she had once slept on concrete, begging for change. She still saw them, the people who hadn't made it out. Some she recognized, some were new. She always carried extra food in her bag. Some nights, she sat with them listening, not judging, because she knew. She knew what it was like to be invisible, and she had sworn, never again. One evening, she stood in front of a mirror, staring at the woman looking back. She was different now, stronger, alive. She ran a hand over the faint scar on her arm, the last physical reminder of who she used to be. She would never forget, but she was no longer a prisoner of her past. She was free. Recovery isn't easy. It's brutal, painful. Some days it feels impossible, but it's worth it. Amber had spent years believing she was too far gone, that she wasn't worth saving. She was wrong. There is always a way back. No matter how dark, how lost, how broken you feel, you are never beyond saving. If Amber could make it out, so can you. If you're struggling, hold on. If you know someone who's lost, don't give up on them. Because sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one second chance, one person willing to say, "I see you." If this story moved you, share it. Because someone out there needs to hear this. Someone is sitting in their car, starving, shaking, feeling invisible, just like Amber once did. And maybe, just maybe, they'll read this and realize they are not alone. They can survive, and they can live. Let's be that light for someone, because hope is contagious. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life is to remind someone that they still have one. Recovery is not a straight path. It is messy, painful, and sometimes feels impossible. Amber learned this the hard way. There were days she wanted to quit, nights when the ghosts of her past whispered that she would never escape. But she kept going. She fought through the agony, the cravings, the weight of her own regrets. And in the end, she found something she had thought was long lost, herself. Her story is proof that no matter how far someone falls, there is always a way back. No one is ever too broken to heal, too lost to be found, or too far gone to start again. If you are struggling, hold on. If you know someone who is drowning, don't look away. One act of kindness, one second chance, one person who refuses to give up, it can make all the difference. Amber survived because someone believed in her when she no longer believed in herself. Be that person for someone, because in the darkest moments, when all hope seems lost, sometimes all it takes to change a life is for someone to say, "You are not alone."